Emily Carter had always known she wanted to serve. Growing up in a small Midwestern town, she'd watched her older brother join the Army, her father retire from the Marines, and her grandfather fly the Stars and Stripes proudly outside their modest home every morning. But Emily's path wasn't as straightforward. While others seemed to stride confidently toward their futures, she carried doubts. Was she strong enough, disciplined enough, worthy enough to wear the uniform? Her decision came one winter evening during her final year of college. She'd sat alone in the library, staring at a stack of unfinished assignments, feeling directionless. Outside the window, snow drifted lazily under the glow of streetlights. Her phone buzzed with a message from her brother, deployed overseas. "Don't let fear decide for you, Em. If you want to serve, serve. If not, that's okay too. But don't sit still." That night, she filled out the paperwork for the Navy. Training was grueling, a shock to both her body and her mind. Early mornings, endless drills, the sting of shouted corrections. It was a far cry from the quiet predictability of her old life. At first, she faltered. Push-ups left her trembling. Uniform inspections revealed tiny mistakes she hadn't even noticed, and her nerves betrayed her during weapons training. But beneath her struggles, an ember of determination burned. Each day she woke sore, humiliated, but stubbornly resolved not to be the one who quit. By graduation, Emily was not the same hesitant girl who had signed the paperwork. Her posture was straighter, her voice steadier, her sense of purpose firmer. Yet she still felt like she was only beginning one small fish in a massive ocean. When she received orders assigning her to Naval Base Coronado in San Diego, she packed her sea bag with both pride and anxiety. Coronado was unlike anywhere she had ever been. The salty air, the endless blue horizon, the hum of helicopters overhead, and the sight of battle-ready SEAL teams jogging in perfect rhythm, all of it reminded her that she was standing at the only gateway to something bigger than herself. But she was not a SEAL. She wasn't even close. She was an enlisted sailor, fresh out of training, and her first assignment was not glamorous. "Gate duty," her sergeant had said, sliding the orders across the desk. Emily nodded sharply, but inside her heart sank. Standing watch at the main gate sounded menial, thankless. She pictured herself as little more than a human turnstile, waving cars in and out while everyone else carried out important missions. Still, she told herself, if this was her role, she would do it well. Her first day arrived under the sharp glare of the California sun. The uniform, freshly pressed that morning, clung tightly in the heat, but Emily ignored the sweat gathering. At her collar, she checked her reflection quickly in the small mirror near the guard shack. Hair neatly secured, cover squared, boots shined. She looked the part, even if she didn't fully feel it. At 0600 sharp, she took her post at the gate. Vehicles lined up in a steady stream, sailors rushing to make muster, officers heading toward meetings, contractors delivering supplies. Emily followed procedure: carefully request ID, inspect it, confirm credentials, return it with a salute. Over and over again. On the surface, the task was simple. But inside, she wrestled with nerves. Every interaction felt like a test, every salute scrutinized. She worried her hand wavered, that her voice lacked authority, that her eyes revealed the uncertainty she worked so hard to hide. The other gate guards barely noticed her. Veterans of the job, they chatted easily between cars, laughing about last night's football game or weekend plans. Emily stayed silent, too focused on not messing up to join their banter. She felt like a shadow present, functional, but invisible. Still, she clung to discipline. Every ID she checked, she did with precision. Every salute, she gave with respect. Each word of "morning, sir," or "have a good day, ma'am," she delivered with steadiness. It wasn't just gate duty to her. It was her chance to prove that she belonged. But belonging didn't come easily. Some drivers barely looked at her, their salutes sloppy, their eyes already on the day ahead. Others gave her half-smiles that felt more patronizing than kind. And though nobody said it aloud, Emily imagined their thoughts. She's new. She's green. She's just filling space. By mid-morning, her throat was dry from repeating the same phrases. Her arms sore from saluting. Sweat trickled beneath her collar, and she shifted her weight slightly to ease the ache in her legs. Yet she refused to relax too much. She wouldn't be the rookie caught slouching when an officer drove through. Her mind wandered briefly to home, to her mother's kitchen, where the smell of cinnamon rolls always lingered on weekends, to her father's stories about Marine Corps discipline. She wondered what they would say if they could see her now standing at the edge of one of the Navy's most important bases, a tiny cog in the massive machinery of national defense. Would they be proud? Or would they think she'd been placed? Somewhere small, somewhere safe, because she wasn't ready for more? As these thoughts swirled, she caught sight of something unusual. A sleek black SUV rolled into line, its tinted windows reflecting the sunlight. On the front license plate glinted a distinct insignia, the kind she had only seen in briefings. The vehicle moved slowly toward the gate, and Emily felt her pulse quicken. Whoever sat inside was no ordinary officer. She straightened immediately, wiping a bead of sweat discreetly from her temple. Her nerves sharpened into focus. This moment mattered. She would not let her inexperience show. She rehearsed the motions in her mind. Step forward, request ID, inspect carefully, return with professionalism, deliver the salute perfectly. The SUV stopped in front of her. For a split second, the world seemed to quiet the chatter of other guards, the hum of idling engines, even the pounding of her own heart. She stepped forward, extending her hand firmly. The window lowered, and a badge was offered. Emily's eyes dropped to the name. The words on the card nearly made her breath catch. Commander Jonathan Hayes. She knew the name. Everyone did. Stories about him floated across the base like folklore Navy SEAL, decorated. For valor, respected and feared in equal measure. He wasn't just another officer. He was a symbol of everything the Navy revered: strength, courage, leadership. Emily's fingers trembled slightly as she held the ID, but she steadied them, forcing professionalism. She scanned the card, confirmed its validity, and returned it with both hands. Then she snapped into a sharp salute, her arm perfectly aligned, her stance unyielding. She expected what she'd seen 100 times that morning. A quick nod, maybe a distracted return salute, and then the vehicle moving forward. That was the rhythm of the gate. That was the way things worked. But deep down, as her hand hovered at her brow, she sensed something was different. The way Hayes's eyes fixed on her, the way silence seemed to stretch in the air, something unexpected was coming. Emily held her salute, heart hammering, waiting for the commander's response. The morning sun had climbed higher now, spilling bright California light across the guard post. Heat shimmered faintly on the asphalt, and the smell of fuel and sea air mixed in the breeze that drifted from the nearby harbor. Emily Carter adjusted, her cap slightly, the brim shading her eyes as she scanned the line of vehicles inching toward the gate. Each car followed the same rhythm. Engine hum, brake squeak, ID presented, salute given, vehicle waved through. To an outside observer, the process looked mechanical, repetitive. But inside Emily's mind, it was anything but. Each interaction felt monumental. Each ID check was another chance to get it right or make a mistake that would mark her as incompetent. She had promised herself she would not falter. A small sedan rolled forward, its driver a petty officer she barely recognized. The man barely glanced at her as he handed over his credentials. Clearly distracted, his phone propped in the coup folder buzzing with notifications. Emily scanned his ID quickly but carefully, suppressing the urge to rush just because he seemed impatient. "Morning, petty officer," she said evenly, returning the card with a salute. The petty officer gave a half-hearted wave, more gesture than respect, before pulling through. Emily's salute dropped slowly, her jaw tightening. Discipline should be sharp on both sides, she thought, but she quickly pushed the irritation away. She wasn't here to critique others. She was here to prove herself. The next few vehicles passed in similar fashion contractors with delivery passes. Enlisted sailors who nodded curtly, officers who barely glanced at her, some acknowledged her salute, others treated it as a formality. Emily stayed disciplined, but the lack of recognition gnawed at her. She felt invisible, like a cog turning endlessly in a wheel too large to notice her presence. Still, her body refused to relax. Her stance remained rigid, her hand ready, her eyes sharp. She remembered what her instructor had drilled into her. During training, even the smallest task can reveal the truest measure of a sailor. Stand tall. Be sharp, always. She clung to those words as a kind of lifeline. From the corner of her eye, Emily noticed the other guards laughing quietly between themselves, sharing inside jokes as they leaned against the shaded side of the booth. Their casual confidence made her feel even more like an outsider. They had the ease of experience, the rhythm of routine. She had only nerves and determination. Her gaze drifted briefly to the horizon, where the Pacific sparkled under the late morning light. Helicopters thumped in the distance, their rotors echoing faintly against the sky. Somewhere beyond, seals were likely training in the surf, pushing themselves to the edge of human endurance. The thought reminded her how small her post seemed compared to the missions unfolding across the base. What am I compared to them? She wondered. Then she scolded herself silently. Focus. Do your job. Do it well. The next car arrived, a beat-up pickup truck carrying two sailors in uniform. They grinned as they handed over their IDs, making a joke she couldn't quite catch. Emily checked their cards with professional speed, forcing a polite smile. "You're clear," she said, returning them. She saluted crisply, ignoring the casual mock salute one of them tossed back with exaggerated flair. As the truck rolled away, laughter echoing from inside, Emily's lips pressed into a thin line. Her chest tightened. It wasn't disrespect exactly, but it reinforced the knowing fear that nobody took her seriously. She was new. She was the rookie. Then, out of the steady stream of traffic, something shifted. A vehicle caught her eye before it even reached the checkpoint. It wasn't the usual sedan or truck. It was larger, sleeker, a black SUV with dark tinted windows. The kind of vehicle that carried weight, authority. She noticed the polished shine of its exterior, the subtle reflection of sunlight glinting off its surface. And then, most striking of all, the insignia displayed on the front plate. Her breath hitched. This wasn't just another sailor heading to work. She could feel it in her bones. The energy around the gate seemed to still as the SUV crept closer. Conversations among the guards quieted unconsciously. The hum of the engine was deeper, heavier, resonant in a way that commanded attention. Emily's heartbeat picked up. She straightened instinctively, rolling her shoulders back, adjusting her cap once more. Sweat slid down the back of her neck, but she ignored it. Her focus sharpened to a fine edge. This one matters. Her mind raced through the procedure. Step forward, extend hand, request identification. Scan carefully, no rushing. Return the card respectfully. Salute sharply, flawlessly. She repeated the steps like a mantra, calming her nerves. Yet, despite her preparation, the tremor of anticipation fluttered through her chest. The SUV rolled to a stop directly before her. For a heartbeat, The world around her seemed suspended, the chatter of radios, the shuffle of boots, even the distant cry of gulls overhead. Emily inhaled slowly, steadying herself. Then, with deliberate professionalism, she stepped forward. To the driver's window. The tinted glass lowered with a quiet hum, revealing the driver inside. A uniformed aide extended a badge toward her. Arm steady, motion practiced. Emily reached out, her fingers brushing against the edge of the ID as. She accepted it. Her eyes scanned the card, and in that instant, her breath caught. The name stared back at her in bold print. Commander Jonathan Hayes. Her throat tightened, pulse quickening. She had heard the name whispered across the base like a legend. Hayes wasn't just a commander, he was a Navy SEAL officer, decorated. For missions that never made headlines, but were spoken of in hushed tones among sailors. Stories of his discipline, his presence, his exacting standards circulated like folklore. Emily swallowed hard, forcing her face into calm neutrality, even as her heart hammered in her chest. She couldn't falter no, not in front of him. She handed the ID back with both hands, her fingers precise, her movements respectful. Then, snapping to attention, she brought her right hand sharply to her brow. The salute was crisp, perfectly aligned, executed with every ounce of training she possessed. For a fraction of a second, she waited, breath trapped in her lungs. This was it, the moment that would define her morning. She expected the familiar rhythm, a brief acknowledgement, perhaps a perfunctory salute returned, and then the SUV moving forward like all the others. But something felt different. The weight of Commander Hayes's presence was undeniable. His gaze met hers, steady, sharp, unreadable. And in that silence, as the sunlight glinted off his uniform collar, Emily felt the air around them shift. Her hand remained firm at her brow, but inside she was trembling. What happened next would not only shatter her expectations, but ripple far beyond the guard post itself. Emily Carter's eyes lingered on the identification card longer than necessary. The letters seemed to pulse on the small rectangle of plastic. Commander Jonathan Hayes. Her fingers gripped the edge of the card tightly, as though it might slip from her hand. She forced her eyes up, past the perfectly pressed uniform inside the SUV, to the face that had been etched into her imagination through stories, passed quietly among sailors. Strong, chiseled features. Eyes that looked as though they could see through hesitation itself. A man whose reputation preceded him wherever he went. Her heart pounded in her chest like a drum. She had heard about him in training. Hayes, the SEAL commander with more combat ribbons than most sailors would ever see in a lifetime. He was said to be relentless, demanding, and precise, an officer who set a standard that few could match. Even those who had never spoken to him carried themselves differently when his name entered a conversation. And now, here he was, seated in front of her. Emily's throat tightened, but she pressed the card back into his aide's waiting hand with meticulous care. Her movements were controlled, deliberate, as though slowing them might steady the chaos in her chest. She took half a step back, boots snapping against the asphalt. Her right arm lifted smoothly, her hand snapping into place at her brow. The salute was perfect, sharper, crisper than any she had given that day. Her arm trembled slightly, but she held it firm, eyes fixed on the Commander. She knew what came next. The rhythm was predictable, unbreakable. She had seen it play out dozens of times already that morning. The officer would give a polite, almost perfunctory return salute, and the SUV would glide forward through the gate. But Commander Hayes didn't move. Instead, his gaze locked onto hers. Piercing, steady, his face revealed nothing, no irritation, no dismissive hurry, no trace of routine, just silence. The air around the checkpoint seemed to still. The chatter of the other guards faded, swallowed by the intensity of the moment. Engines idled, Heat radiated off the asphalt. A seagull cried in the distance, and yet all of it seemed far away, muffled under the weight of that stare. Emily's pulse thundered in her ears. Her arm remained high, salute held perfectly, though. Inside, she was unraveling. Was she doing something wrong? Had she hesitated too long with his ID? Had her inexperience shown through, and now he was silently judging her? The doubt pressed in, sharp and merciless. Then, without warning, Hayes moved. The commander's right hand rose, deliberate and unwavering, fingers aligning in precise military fashion. The motion was crisp, flawless textbook. But it wasn't. Just the salute itself that left Emily stunned. It was the order in which it came. He saluted first. For a heartbeat, Emily froze. Her training screamed against the sight. Salutes followed her rhythm, a structure ingrained into her bones. Junior first, senior returns. That was the way. That was the rule. Yet here stood a man of unmatched rank and reputation, SEAL commander, breaking that rhythm to raise his hand. To her chest constricted, breath caught mid-inhale. Around her, whispers stirred. One of the other guards shifted uneasily, eyes darting toward her and then back at Hayes, as though trying to confirm what they had just seen. A petty officer in the next vehicle leaned forward slightly in his seat, mouth parted in disbelief. The world seemed to hang suspended in that impossible gesture. Emily forced her body to react, snapping her arm even straighter, eyes forward, hand firm against her brow. Her salute no longer trembled. It cut through the air with newfound steadiness, as though Hayes's gesture had passed some invisible torch into her. For several long seconds, their salutes held. The silence was deafening. Emily could hear the faint rush of blood in her ears, the thump of her own heartbeat, the far-off cry of a gull circling the base. Yet none of it mattered. In that instant, there was only the weight of his eyes, the strength of his salute, and the undeniable truth of the respect it carried. Then, just as deliberately as it had risen, Hayes's hand lowered. He didn't speak. He didn't smile. He didn't break eye contact until the very last moment, when he stepped back into the SUV, the door closing with a heavy thud. The vehicle rolled forward slowly, tires crunching against the pavement. Within moments, it was gone, swallowed by the bustle of the base beyond the gate. Emily's arm dropped to her side, but her body remained locked in place. Her chest heaved with a quiet, restrained breath. She felt the sting of sweat on her temple, the ache in her shoulders from standing so rigidly. And yet, she couldn't move, not yet. Not until she understood what had just happened. Around her, the air buzzed with quiet astonishment. The sergeant stationed nearby muttered something under his breath, shaking his head as though questioning his own eyes. A junior guard blinked repeatedly, looking between Emily and the direction the SUV had gone, as if trying to piece together the logic of what he'd witnessed. Nobody said it aloud, but the truth was evident in their stunned expressions. A SEAL commander had saluted a rookie first. Emily's heart still raced, but now the tremor carried something new. Pride, fear, confusion. A storm of emotions churned. Inside her, she felt taller, sharper, more visible than she had in her entire short career. But the weight of it pressed against her just as strongly. Why had he done it? It wasn't protocol. It wasn't routine. And Hayes was not the kind of man who wasted gestures lightly. He was deliberate, calculated. Every motion, every word carried purpose. Which meant this salute, the first one, his salute had been intentional. And it had been for her. Emily straightened again, her hands curling into fists at her sides. She swallowed hard, forcing her breathing to steady. She knew she couldn't let the swirl of thoughts distract her. She had a job to do, and the line of vehicles waiting beyond the gate reminded her that the world hadn't paused for long. But Deep inside, a seed had been planted. A seed of possibility, of meaning, of something far larger than the gate or the routine of ID checks. The salute would not leave her mind. It had been a silent message, one she couldn't yet decipher, but one she would never forget. The air at the checkpoint felt heavier than it had all morning. The SUV carrying Commander Hayes rolled forward, disappearing into the base with the same quiet authority it had arrived with. Yet the silence it left behind pressed against every sailor at the gate like a weight. Engines idled, brakes hissed, radios crackled faintly, but for those who had witnessed it, the moment still hung suspended in the air. Emily Carter stood frozen. Her hand, now lowered from the salute, tingled faintly from the stiffness of holding it so long. Her posture remained rigid, though every nerve in her body screamed with the aftershock of what had just happened. Commander Hayes had saluted her first. The thought replayed again and again, looping in her mind as though it were some surreal dream she might wake from. It clashed violently with the rhythm of her training, the rules etched into her bones. Junior first, senior returns. That was the law of the salute, the sacred dance of respect. And yet, in full view of witnesses, a decorated SEAL commander had broken that rhythm for her. Her throat was dry. She wanted to swallow, but her body refused. To her left, Petty Officer Ramirez, another gate guard, shifted uncomfortably. His mouth twitched as though he wanted to speak, but no words came. Finally, he muttered, Did that just happen? Emily didn't answer. She couldn't. The sergeant in charge of the gate that morning, a seasoned, broad-shouldered man with a reputation for noticing everything, stood unusually still. His eyes, usually sharp and critical, carried something different now. Not disbelief. Exactly. Not admiration either. Something between. He gave Emily a single brief look, then turned his gaze back to the road as though to pretend he hadn't seen anything at all. But the silence of those around her spoke louder than words. Emily straightened, forcing her shoulders back, her chin lifted slightly higher than before. She tried to channel every ounce of composure she had, though her pulse still hammered in her ears. The line of vehicles beyond the checkpoint crept forward, their drivers shifting impatiently in their seats, waiting for the rhythm of duty to resume. Her training barked in her mind, Don't stop, don't stumble. Keep moving. The next car pulled up. Emily stepped forward mechanically, extending her hand for the ID. A middle-aged officer handed her his credentials, his expression carefully neutral, but his eyes flickered briefly, betraying that he too had seen what had transpired moments earlier. She checked the card, returned it, saluted with practiced precision. He saluted back, crisp and proper, then drove on. The rhythm returned, but the energy was different. Each driver who passed through that gate looked at Emily with a hint of curiosity, even subtle respect. They didn't say anything, no one dared speak openly about what they had just witnessed, but the shift was there, unmistakable. She was no longer invisible. Her hands moved automatically, but her thoughts churned with relentless force. Why me? That question echoed louder than any sound around her. She replayed the moment in vivid detail, the way Hayes's eyes had locked onto hers, the sharpness of his salute, the deliberate precision of it. It hadn't been a mistake. It hadn't been an accident. The commander had made a choice. But what did it mean? The hours dragged on, each interaction blending into the next, but Emily's focus had fractured. Every time she lifted her hand in salute, she felt the weight of his still lingering in her muscles. Every time she checked an ID, she wondered if the driver had already heard whispers of the story. By late morning, she could sense the ripple beginning. Word would spread. It always did. Sailors thrived on stories, especially ones that bent the rigid rules of tradition. By noon, the entire base might be buzzing with it. The rookie on gate. Duty, the commander, saluted her first. The thought made her stomach twist. Part of her wanted to shrink under the weight of it, terrified that others would scrutinize her, expect her to live up to something she couldn't yet understand. But another part of her, the part that had carried her through training when she'd wanted to quit, felt a surge of pride. He had seen her. Out of all the hundreds of sailors he passed daily, Hayes had chosen her for that gesture. Intentional, deliberate, meaningful, and yet she couldn't grasp the why. As the morning bled into afternoon, the California sun pressed hotter, sweat soaking through her undershirt. But Emily no longer felt the sting of heat or the ache in her legs. Her mind circled endlessly around the salute, dissecting every detail. Ramirez finally broke the silence after hours of tense routine. He leaned slightly closer during a lull in traffic, his voice low. "Carter, don't let it get to your head." I don't know what that was, but just stay sharp. Emily didn't respond. She simply nodded, eyes forward. She understood his warning. The Navy had little patience for rookies who believed they were special. And yet, deep down, she knew something had shifted. When her shift finally ended, Emily walked off post with her cover tucked under her arm. Her boots crunched against the gravel path, leading back toward the barracks. Around her, the base pulsed with life formations drilling on the parade field. Sailors moving briskly between buildings, the distant crash of surf against the shore. But Emily felt like she was moving through a haze. Her body went through the motions, logging her end-of-shift notes, hanging up her gear, scrubbing her face of sweat in the barracks bathroom. But her mind refused to let go. The salute replayed in her memory with perfect clarity. The crispness of it, the authority, the gravity, and the eyes, those piercing eyes that had measured her silently before he raised his hand. That night, lying in her bunk, Emily stared at the ceiling long after lights out. Around her, the barracks buzzed with faint snores and the creak of bed springs as others shifted in their sleep. But she lay rigid, hands folded across her stomach, eyes unblinking in the darkness. Her thoughts churned. The salute had not been routine. It had not been empty courtesy. It had been something else, a message, a charge, a challenge. She could feel it in her bones, even if she couldn't yet put it into words. Commander Hayes had saluted her first, and nothing about her service would ever feel the same again. By the next morning, the salute had already grown into a story larger than the moment itself. Emily noticed it the instant she stepped out of the barracks and crossed the sun-bleached courtyard toward muster. People looked at her differently. Now, not everyone, of course many carried on with the usual rush of routine, focused on their duties. But enough heads turned, enough eyes lingered, to let her know the rumor had spread. "Hey, that's her," one voice whispered faintly. "She's the one he saluted." Emily pretended not to hear, her face set in the neutral expression she had practiced so carefully since boot camp. But her stomach twisted with every passing comment. It wasn't just recognition. It was curiosity, speculation, even envy. The Navy thrived on stories, especially ones that bent the rigid order of tradition. And a SEAL commander saluting a gate guard first? That was the kind of story destined to ripple across every chow hall, every barracks, every late-night conversation. By the time she reported for duty, Emily could feel the weight of eyes on her even before she reached the gate shack. Ramirez gave her a look she couldn't quite read, part skepticism, part concern. He didn't say anything, but the subtle shake of his head spoke volumes. "Carter," the sergeant called, his tone firm but not unkind. "With me." Her boots struck hard against the pavement as she followed him a few paces away from the gate. The hum of vehicles and the chatter of IDs being checked faded slightly as the sergeant folded his arms across his chest and studied her. "You know, people are talking," he said flatly. "Yes, Sergeant," Emily replied, keeping her voice steady. He didn't accuse. He didn't criticize. Instead, he let silence fill the space before continuing. "Respect in this uniform isn't given lightly. You'll learn that. Sometimes it's earned in ways you don't even see." He tilted his head slightly. "Hayes doesn't salute first without a reason." The words hit her like a physical force. Without a reason. But what reason? She hadn't done anything extraordinary. She hadn't even been on the gate more than a few days. She was just another rookie, standing where she was told, doing exactly what the manual demanded. The sergeant's gaze softened slightly, though his voice remained stern. "Don't let it go to your head. Don't think you're special. You're still green, still learning." But whatever he saw, whether it was discipline, composure, or something else, it's yours to carry now. Don't waste it. Emily swallowed hard. "Aye, Sergeant." He nodded once, then turned back toward the post. Conversation over. But Emily's mind raced as she resumed her duties. Every ID she checked, every salute she rendered, carried a new weight. People weren't just seeing her as the rookie on the gate anymore. They were watching her as the one who had been saluted. By noon, the whispers became harder to ignore. A pair of sailors passing through gave her a grin, one even muttering, "Nice work, Carter." Another driver, a chief with years in his eyes, looked at her longer than necessary before saluting back. His expression carried no mockery, only thought. Emily's cheeks burned, though she kept her stance sharp. The pride swelled in her chest, undeniable. For the first time since enlisting, she didn't feel invisible. But pride came laced with fear. What if I mess up now? That thought dug at her with every interaction. If she slipped, if she fumbled an ID, if she saluted sloppily, people would notice. They wouldn't just see a rookie's mistake. They would see a failure unworthy of Hayes's gesture. The hours crawled by, and Emily found herself hyper-aware of every detail. The angle of her salute, the tone of her voice, the steadiness of her posture. She had always cared about doing her duty, but now the stakes felt magnified. That evening, in the chow hall, the air buzzed with conversation, but Emily felt the hum around her like static. She carried her tray, eyes forward, pretending not to notice the glances. A group of sailors near the corner table paused mid-laugh when she walked by, their whispers carrying just enough for her to catch fragments. SEAL Commander saluted her. "Yeah, first." She sat with her usual group, but the silence at the table felt different now. Ramirez finally broke it with a sigh. "Carter, you're a walking rumor mill. You know that, right?" Emily poked at her food, unwilling to meet his gaze. "I didn't ask for it." "I know." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "But that doesn't matter. Perception becomes reality out here. People are going to watch you now. Some will respect you. Some will resent you. And some will wait for you to stumble. Don't give them the chance." His words weren't cruel, but they stung all the same. That night, lying in her bunk, Emily stared once again at the ceiling. The day had drained her, but sleep refused to come. She thought about the salute again, about the silence, the precision, the intent. She remembered the faint glimmer of recognition in Hayes's eyes, as though he had seen something in her that even she didn't know existed. But what if it was just coincidence? What if she was reading too much into it? The doubt gnawed at her. Pride pushed back, reminding her how it had felt to stand tall in that moment, to feel the eyes of the base shift toward her with something like respect. But doubt lingered in the shadows, whispering that she was just a rookie, and soon everyone would realize it. Finally, she rolled onto her side, pressing her face into the thin pillow. One thought carried her into restless dreams. Whatever he meant by that salute, I can't waste it. The next day would come with the same duty, the same gate, the same endless line of cars. But nothing was the same anymore. Not for Emily Carter. She was no longer invisible. And the weight of being seen had only just begun. By the third morning after the salute, Emily Carter could no longer deny she had become a story. Not just a fleeting moment at the gate, not just whispers in passing, but a fully grown rumor with roots spreading into every corner of Naval Base Coronado. At breakfast, she overheard two supply clerks debating it. One swore he had a cousin who'd seen it happen firsthand. The other insisted it was exaggerated, that surely Hayes had saluted second, and the rookie at the gate had just gotten the order mixed up. In the gym later that day, a pair of sailors spotted her between sets and gave each other knowing looks. "That's her," one muttered, not even trying to lower his voice. Emily lifted her weights with steady rhythm, pretending she didn't hear, but inside her stomach churned. She hadn't asked for any of this, yet it followed her everywhere. The gate felt different too. Before, it had been routine. Check the ID, confirm the credentials, render the salute. Most drivers barely looked at her. But now, each interaction carried a subtle shift. Some sailors saluted back with sharper precision, as though testing whether she would match their standard. Others grinned or raised their eyebrows, quietly acknowledging her new reputation. A few looked at her with skepticism, their eyes asking a silent question. "Why you?" Ramirez noticed it too. "You're not just Carter anymore," he muttered. One afternoon as they rotated shifts, "You're the one Hayes saluted. You're a headline walking around in uniform." Emily frowned. "I didn't do anything different." "Doesn't matter," Ramirez said with a shrug. "Perception is louder than reality. People think it means something. That's enough." By noon that same day, her supervisor, a stern chief petty officer named Daniels, approached her post. Daniels rarely wasted words, and when he did speak, his voice carried the gravel of decades at sea. "Carter, walk with me." Emily stiffened. She nodded to Ramirez to cover the gate, and followed Daniels a short distance down the paved shoulder, until the noise of traffic softened. For a long moment, Daniels said nothing. He simply looked out over the chain-link fence toward the distant shoreline, where gulls wheeled above the glittering Pacific. Finally, he spoke. "You've stirred up a storm, whether you meant to or not." Emily swallowed hard. Chief, I know." "You know the rules," Daniels continued. "Junior salutes first. Always. That's not just tradition. It's order, discipline, structure." He turned his head slightly, his sharp eyes locking on hers. "And yet Hayes saluted you first, deliberately." Emily opened her mouth, then closed it again. She had no explanation. Daniels studied her a moment longer, before his gaze softened not. "With kindness exactly, but with measured patience. Hayes isn't careless. He doesn't make gestures without purpose. He's been through more than most can imagine. He's seen sailors at their best and their worst. If he chose to salute you first, it wasn't for show. It was a message." Emily felt her pulse quicken. "What kind of message, Chief?" "That," Daniels said, turning back toward the ocean, "isn't for me to answer. But I'll tell. You, this respect in this Navy isn't automatic. Rank earns obedience, but respect?" He tapped two fingers against his chest. "That's earned here. Sometimes in ways you don't even notice yourself." Emily absorbed the words in silence, the weight of them pressing into her like armor. She had thought the salute was a one-off moment, something extraordinary but fleeting. Now she realized it had become a challenge, an unspoken expectation to live up to whatever Hayes had seen in her. Daniels let the silence hang, then nodded back toward the gate. "Do your duty. That's all anyone can ask of you. But do it like every set of eyes is on you. Because right now they are." The days that followed confirmed his warning. The story of the salute had grown legs. In the chow hall, she heard it retold with embellishments. One sailor claimed Hayes had stepped out of his SUV and shaken her hand after saluting. Another swore there had been a crowd of 50 watching when it happened. The truth had become blurred, but the essence remained. A commander had saluted a gate guard first. Emily became a symbol without meaning to be one. Some treated her with new respect. Junior sailors who had once brushed past her now offered friendly nods or quiet encouragement. A petty officer she barely knew stopped her in the corridor one day and said, "Good job holding your ground out there." Others, though, were less kind. One evening, as she left the gym, she overheard a pair of older sailors scoff. "It's nothing. Just a rookie who got lucky. People are blowing it out of proportion." The words stung, but she forced herself not to react. Instead, she doubled down on her duties. At the gate, she held her posture sharper than ever, her salutes crisp, her voice firm but respectful. She checked every ID with deliberate care, leaving no room for error. If people were watching her, then she would give them nothing to criticize. But beneath the discipline, Emily wrestled with questions she couldn't answer. Why her? Out of all the sailors Hayes encountered daily, why had he chosen that moment, that place, to bend tradition? Was it truly recognition of something in her demeanor? Or had it been a test-away to see how she would carry the weight of attention? Late at night in the barracks, she replayed the moment over and over. The crispness of his salute, the silence that followed, the way he had looked at her measuring, deliberate. She couldn't shake the feeling that it had been more than coincidence. She remembered Daniels's words, "Do your duty like every set of eyes is on you." And so she did. The gate was no longer just a post to her. It wasn't a place of invisibility or routine. It was a stage one, where she had been thrust unwillingly, where every action she took mattered. She wasn't just representing herself anymore. She was carrying the weight of that salute, the trust it implied, the challenge it delivered. One evening, after a long shift, Emily walked the pier as the sun sank into the horizon, painting the Pacific in streaks of gold and crimson. She stood alone, the sea breeze tugging at her uniform, the smell of salt heavy in the air. She thought about the girl she had been just a week earlier, nervous, invisible, convinced she was nothing more than a rookie in an oversized uniform. That girl was gone now. In her place stood someone different, someone seen, someone challenged, someone quietly expected to rise to something greater. Emily clenched her fists at her sides, feeling the strength in her grip. Commander Hayes had saluted her first, and now it was up to her to prove he hadn't been wrong to do so. The days at the gate became less about routine and more about discipline, sharpened to a razor's edge. Emily Carter approached every ID, every driver, every salute with the precision of a surgeon. The weight of Commander Hayes's gesture had settled onto her shoulders like a mantle, heavy, deliberate, unavoidable. She was no longer just a rookie on gate duty. She was the sailor who had earned, or at least received, the commander's respect. And with that respect came a responsibility she could not ignore. Each morning, she arrived early. Her uniform was pristine, boots polished, mirror shine, cover squared with exacting care. Before dawn, she would jog around the perimeter of the base, loosening stiff muscles, focusing her mind. Every movement, every breath was deliberate. It was no longer enough to simply meet standards. She wanted to exceed them. Her posture became sharper, her voice firmer, her eyes scanning every approaching vehicle with an awareness that bordered on preternatural. She noticed subtleties others often missed, the slight hesitation of a driver fumbling for an ID, the nervous glance of a new sailor unsure of protocol. And she responded with precision, patience, and authority, earning subtle nods or polite salutes from those who had once ignored her entirely. Ramirez, who had been her co-guard for weeks, noticed the shift immediately. "You're different," he said one afternoon as they rotated shifts. "Not just sharper. People notice. They respect it. And it's not just the Hayes story. You carry yourself like you belong here." Emily smiled faintly, though her mind was elsewhere. "I have to," she replied simply. "Not for them. For me." The truth was that each day at the gate now carried stakes far beyond her original post. Mistakes were no longer just minor lapses. They could feel amplified under the scrutiny that Hayes's salute had brought. She carried the invisible weight of expectation with her. Yet instead of crushing her, it fueled a new determination. She began to anticipate issues before they arose. A vehicle approaching too fast, a distracted driver fumbling with credentials. Emily handled each situation smoothly, with authority she hadn't known she possessed. When a senior officer approached one afternoon, reviewing deliveries for an important base exercise, she intercepted the ID and delivered her salute crisply, catching the officer's subtle nod of approval. The small gesture, nearly imperceptible, filled her with quiet pride. It wasn't just the physical tasks she improved. Her mental acuity sharpened as well. She memorized the faces and vehicles of frequent visitors, recognizing patterns in delivery schedules, training shifts, and officer arrivals. By midweek, she could anticipate who would arrive next, and she prepared accordingly, ensuring every interaction was flawless. The ripple effect of her competence didn't go unnoticed. Other guards, including Ramirez, began to emulate her posture and precision. Newer sailors, hearing the story of Hayes's salute, approached their duties with more care. The gate, once a place of mundane repetition, now buzzed with an understated intensity. Emily had unwittingly become a model, not because she demanded it, but because she had earned it. Yet not everything was smooth. Some individuals remained skeptical or resentful, questioning why a mere rookie had become a symbol of competence. One afternoon, as she checked a delivery truck filled with construction supplies, a contractor scoffed. "I guess saluting the right people is more important than knowing the job, huh?" he muttered under his breath. Emily's hand went up automatically in salute, her voice firm. "ID, please. You're clear once verified." Her tone left no room for argument, no trace of doubt. The man's sneer faded, replaced by the briefest flicker of respect, though she didn't linger on it. Her job was not to win friends, it was to maintain order. After the shift, as she walked back toward the barracks, Emily allowed herself a quiet moment to reflect. She thought about the weeks of training, the long hours of drill, and the exhaustion that had often brought her to tears in the past. And she realized something profound. The salute had not just been recognition, it had been a test, a challenge, a reminder that she was capable of far more than she had believed. The thought carried a strange mixture of pride and pressure. Pride because she had earned the ability to meet that challenge. Pressure because the path ahead was still long and uncertain. Hayes had set the standard, and now it was her responsibility to uphold it. At the barracks, she pored over manuals late into the night, reviewing protocol, procedures, and security measures. She studied past incidents, familiarizing herself with situations she might encounter at the gate. Knowledge became her armor, and discipline her weapon. By the time lights went out, her mind was still sharp, replaying every ID check, every salute, every interaction from the day. The following week brought a small crisis. A delivery truck carrying sensitive equipment arrived with incomplete credentials. The officer inside was anxious, gesturing toward his papers, clearly unfamiliar with protocol. Emily's training and presence of mind kicked in. She calmly verified the vehicle, requested supplementary documentation, and coordinated with the command office without hesitation. The truck remained stationary until the situation was resolved. Afterward, the officer saluted her personally, Not perfunctorily, not casually. He saluted with respect, acknowledging her authority and composure. Emily returned it without wavering, realizing with quiet satisfaction that Hayes's gesture had set a precedent she could now carry forward on her own merit. Her reputation continued to grow. New sailors who had previously brushed past her now offered tentative greetings. Junior officers nodded with polite acknowledgement, and even some of the more skeptical personnel approached with measured respect. Emily didn't revel in the attention. She treated it as a confirmation that her dedication mattered, that the small choices she made at her post could ripple across the base in ways she hadn't anticipated. One evening, after an especially grueling shift, Emily sat alone by the pier, watching the sun dip beneath the horizon. The water sparkled in streaks of gold and crimson, and the salty air carried a sense of calm she rarely felt during the day. She thought of Hayes, of Daniels, and of Ramirez. Each had imparted lessons in different ways, but one truth was clear. Recognition, no matter how unexpected, carried with it responsibility. Emily flexed her hands, imagining the salute she had rendered in those first moments at the gate. She realized she had internalized it, transformed it from a symbol of fleeting honor into a guide for her behavior and mindset. She was not the same rookie who had arrived at Coronado weeks ago. She was sharper, stronger, and aware of the weight. She now carried not just in the uniform she wore, but in every choice she made, every motion she executed. The salute had ignited something deeper, the understanding that even the most ordinary post could become a place of significance if approached with discipline, awareness, and integrity. Emily returned to her bunk, exhausted yet invigorated. She lay down, staring at the ceiling, and let her thoughts settle. Hayes's gesture had been the spark, but the her fire was now hers alone to tend. She closed her eyes, feeling the tide of confidence wash over her. The Navy had tested her, deliberately or not, and she had risen to meet the challenge. Tomorrow, and every day after, she would continue to prove that the salute had not been given in vain. For Emily Carter, the gate was no longer a simple post. It was the place where she had begun to become the sailor she had always wanted to be. And she knew, deep in her bones, that this was only the beginning. Morning arrived crisp and golden over Naval Base Coronado, and Emily Carter was already alert at her post. The air carried the tang of salt and fuel, gulls wheeling overhead, their cries blending with the distant roar of waves against the pier. She stood rigid, uniform impeccable, boots polished until they reflected the sunlight. Today, like every day since Hayes's salute, she was aware of the eyes watching her, not just those passing through the gate, but the countless sailors, officers and civilians whose perceptions now carried weight. Gone was the anxious, unsure rookie who had first arrived at the checkpoint. Every ID she inspected, every salute she returned, every word she spoke, was executed with deliberate precision. Her movements were confident, unhurried, and exact a dance of discipline, honed by repetition, focus, and the constant memory of Hayes's gesture. The first vehicle of the morning approached, a delivery truck with an enlisted officer in the driver's seat. Emily intercepted it with practiced efficiency. "ID, please," she said clearly, extending her hand. The officer handed over his credentials with a small nod. Emily checked them thoroughly, her eyes scanning each detail. When satisfied, she returned the card and snapped to attention. Her salute was crisp, sharp, and unwavering. This time, the salute she received in return carried a subtle difference. The officer's gesture lingered a heartbeat longer, a silent acknowledgement of her presence, her authority, and her competence. Emily's chest swelled slightly, not with arrogance, but with quiet affirmation. She had earned it, and she knew it. The flow of vehicles continued, each interaction reinforcing a growing pattern. Sailors who had once ignored her now treated her with respect. Junior personnel approached with careful precision, clearly aware of her reputation. Even those who had questioned or doubted her performance displayed subtle deference, a recognition that Emily was no longer the invisible rookie they had first encountered. Ramirez, her co-guard for the morning shift, leaned slightly forward and muttered under his breath, "You've got them all walking on eggshells, Carter." "Didn't think I'd ever say that about a gatepost." Emily allowed herself a faint smile but kept her gaze forward. Humor had no place in this moment. Discipline did. By late morning, word had circulated through formal channels as well. A report had been made to Hayes's office. The rookie gate guard had maintained impeccable discipline under pressure, demonstrating composure, precision, and situational awareness that exceeded her experience level. Emily hadn't sought the recognition. She had only focused on her duties. Yet now, even Hayes's office had noticed. The moment came in subtle form. A black SUV rolled up to the gate, familiar and imposing, carrying the same emblem of authority that had once caused her heart to leap. Hayes himself sat inside, reviewing a clipboard in the passenger seat. Emily's pulse quickened, but her posture remained perfect, her hand rising in a flawless salute. This time, Hayes's reaction was different. The salute he returned was precise, deliberate, and carried a weight beyond the formality of protocol. His eyes, meeting hers through the tinted glass, conveyed recognition, approval, and respect, not just for her training, but for her unwavering dedication, for the way she had internalized the responsibility of that first unexpected gesture. Emily lowered her arm slowly, maintaining composure, and allowed a moment for the weight of it to sink in. Hayes's brief nod as the SUV moved forward spoke volumes. The salute had been given first, and now the respect it conveyed was fully mutual. For the first time, Emily felt a sense of completeness in her role. The post was no longer a test, no longer a stage of observation or rumor. It was a place where her skills, discipline, and character mattered. Every decision, every gesture, every interaction had significance. She had grown into the responsibility, transforming a single act into a standard of excellence she could carry forward in her career. Back at the gate, Emily processed the flow of traffic with calm efficiency. She noticed a new delivery crew approach, clearly aware of her reputation. They offered a sharp salute before she even called for ID, and Emily returned it crisply, a small, approving smile tugging at her lips. The exchange was subtle, but meaningful. The respect had become reciprocal, and the weight of expectation no longer intimidated her, it energized her. Her thoughts drifted briefly to the first moments of that morning weeks ago. She recalled the nervous tension, the fear of failure, the wonder and disbelief at the unexpected salute. That single gesture had changed everything. It had set in motion a transformation of her identity, her confidence, and her understanding of service. Emily now realized that recognition was not merely an honor, it was a challenge, a responsibility to uphold the values and discipline she had been entrusted with. Throughout the day, the ripple of her newfound presence extended beyond the gate. Junior sailors observed her attentively. Officers acknowledged her efficiently, and even the casual chatter of the base carried her name with a mix of respect and admiration. She had become a symbol not of luck or chance, but of how discipline, focus, and integrity could elevate one's role, no matter how small or overlooked it might seem. That evening, Emily returned to the barracks, fatigued but fulfilled. She removed her boots and set them neatly by the door, methodical as ever, then sank onto her bunk. The sun had set, casting a warm golden hue across the room, and she allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. The journey from rookie to respected gate guard had not been easy. It had required relentless attention to detail, careful discipline, and the courage to rise above doubt, both her own and that of others. Yet the transformation was undeniable. Emily no longer saw herself as invisible. no longer felt the anxious tremor of self-doubt that had plagued her early days at the base. She was visible, recognized, and most importantly, capable. A single gesture, the unexpected, deliberate salute from a SEAL commander, had been the catalyst. But it had been her own commitment, perseverance, and integrity that had allowed it to become more than a moment. It had become a defining turning point in her career, shaping her reputation and character in ways that would last a lifetime. As Emily lay back against her pillow, she allowed a sense of quiet pride to settle over her. She closed her eyes, envisioning the gates she had manned, the vehicles she had processed, and the countless interactions she had navigated with calm authority. Each image reinforced her growth, her newfound purpose, and the understanding that recognition is only meaningful when met with responsibility. And deep inside, she knew that this was only the beginning. The Navy would continue to challenge her. The base, the gate, and every task she undertook would test her. But Emily Carter now possessed something more than training or skill. She possessed the knowledge that discipline, integrity, and focus could transform even the simplest post into a place of significance. The salute had been a spark. Emily had become the fire. And for the first time in her life, she welcomed the heat.